The coffee shop wasn't even on my radar until that Tuesday morning. My 10 a.m. meeting with Lockheed's avionics team got pushed to Thursday. Something about a scheduling conflict with their senior engineers, leaving me with a hole in my schedule and a craving for caffeine that 3 cups of office sludge hadn't satisfied. I'd driven past the grind 100 times without ever stopping. It was one of those trendy places with exposed brick and reclaimed wood that seemed designed for Instagram photos rather than actual coffee drinking. The kind of place where a medium is called a grande, and everything costs twice what it should. But my usual spot was 20 minutes in the wrong direction, and I figured why not? 15 years ago, a younger version of me would have called this spontaneity. At 38, I called it efficient scheduling. That decision, pulling into that parking lot at 10 a.m. on an unremarkable October morning, changed everything. If the Lockheed meeting hadn't been canceled, if I'd just gone back to the office, if I'd taken a different exit off the highway, 1,000 tiny decisions, all leading to this moment. The universe, I've learned, has a dark sense of humor. The barista was young, maybe 21, with purple streaks in her hair and a nose ring that caught the light. Her name tag said, Haley. She was wiping down the espresso machine when I approached, humming something I didn't recognize, and when she looked up, something flickered across her face. Recognition. Clear, unmistakable recognition. "Oh my God," she said, her voice lifting with genuine warmth. "You're Linda's husband." I stopped mid-step. My wife's name coming from a stranger's mouth in a coffee shop I'd never entered. The world tilted slightly, that moment of disorientation you get when reality doesn't match expectation. "I'm sorry?" "Linda Cole, right? You have to be..." She has your picture on her phone. The one from your anniversary trip to Savannah? Haley was grinning now, the smile of someone sharing good news, completely oblivious to the ground shifting beneath my feet. "She comes in like almost every day with her friend. They always sit at the corner table, the one by the window with the plant. She's so sweet. She always asks about my classes, wants to know if I'm keeping up with my grades." My mind processed this information the way it had processed threat assessments in Kandahar. Calm, methodical, no external reaction. The lizard brain wanted to grab this girl by the shoulders and shake more information out of her, but 8 years in the army had taught me better. "Her friend," I repeated, keeping my voice even. Haley's smile faltered. Something in my tone, maybe, or perhaps she finally noticed that my expression hadn't changed from the moment she'd started talking. "Yeah, they usually get here around 10:30, sometimes earlier if it's not too busy." Her eyes darted to the side, seeking escape. "I thought you knew. I mean, I just assumed since you're her husband and all." "What friend?" The color drained from her face. She realized in that moment what she'd walked into, what she'd revealed. The cheerful young woman who'd been humming moments ago now looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. Look, I'm sorry, I just assumed..." "Black coffee," I said. "Large." She practically fled to the coffee machine, her hands shaking as she grabbed a cup. I watched her fumble with the lid, spill grounds on the counter, mutter an apology to no one in particular. When she finally handed me the cup, she couldn't meet my eyes. "On the house," she said quietly. "I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to..." "It's fine." I left a 10 on the counter anyway because none of this was her fault. She was just a college kid who'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. "Keep it." I walked to the corner table she'd mentioned. It was tucked against the window, partially obscured by a decorative plant with leaves that had seen better days. Private, intimate. The kind of spot you'd choose if you didn't want to be seen by casual passers-by. The kind of spot you'd choose if you were hiding something. I sat down and waited. 45 minutes. I nursed that coffee for 45 minutes, watching the door, running license plates in my head for every vehicle that pulled into the lot. A silver Honda Civic. An older Ford pickup with rust around the wheel wells. A red Jeep Wrangler with the top down despite the October chill. Each time the door opened, my pulse spiked despite my best efforts. But it was never Linda. A group of college students with laptops. An elderly couple splitting a muffin. A harried mother with a toddler who screamed for approximately 15 minutes straight. Linda never showed. Maybe she'd sensed something. Maybe she'd driven past and seen my car. Except she wouldn't recognize it. I'd taken the rental while my BMW was in the shop. Maybe it was just coincidence. A day her schedule didn't align with her usual routine. Or maybe I was wrong about everything. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe the friend was just a girlfriend from work, and I was constructing a crisis out of nothing. I wanted to believe that. God, how I wanted to believe that. When I finally left, I made note of the address, photographing the storefront with my phone. This coffee shop was 20 minutes out of Linda's way to work. I pulled up Google Maps and traced the route from our house to her office downtown. She passed 3 Starbucks, 2 independent cafes, and a Dunkin' Donuts to get here. That wasn't convenience. That wasn't habit. That was intention. That night, I tested her. We were in the kitchen. Linda loading the dishwasher while I pretended to read emails on my phone, keeping my face carefully neutral. Ethan and Sophie were upstairs, their voices carrying through the floor in that perpetual sibling squabble about whose turn it was on the Xbox. Normal evening, normal family sounds. The soundtrack of a life I was beginning to suspect was a lie. "Tried a new coffee place today," I said, keeping my voice casual, as if I were discussing the weather. "The Grind, over on Peachtree Industrial. You ever been there?" I watched her reflection in the window above the sink. Her hands never stopped moving. Plate, rinse, rack, repeat. Her shoulders didn't tense. Her breathing didn't change. Not even a momentary pause in her rhythm. "Don't think so," she said. "Any good?" "Decent. Nice atmosphere. They had these little tables by the window, kind of private." I waited for a reaction. A flinch, a tell, anything. Nothing. "Maybe we should check it out sometime," she said, glancing over her shoulder with that familiar smile. "Have a coffee date like we used to." "Yeah," I said. "Maybe." She turned back to the dishes, and I watched her in the glass. My wife of 11 years, mother of my children, woman I'd pledged my life to in front of 200 witnesses. Her eyes had given away nothing. Her performance had been flawless. My wife, I realized, was an exceptional liar. And I had no idea how long she'd been practicing. I didn't confront her, didn't check her phone, didn't hire anyone. Not yet. For the next 7 days, I simply observed. The way a hunter learns the patterns of his prey. The way a soldier learns the terrain before an operation. It's remarkable what you notice when you're actually looking. The late nights at work that had become routine over the past 8 months, quarterly reports, she'd said, or client presentations, always something plausible, always something I'd accepted without question. The gym membership she'd gotten in January that she barely seemed to use. She left the house in yoga pants and came back looking exactly the same. No flush of exercise, no dampness in her hair, no subtle shift in her physique despite 8 months of supposed workouts. The password on her phone, changed in March. Security reasons, she'd claimed when I noticed. The IT department at work said we should all update our passwords more often. I'd nodded and thought nothing of it. Why would I? This was Linda. My Linda. The woman who'd held my hand in the delivery room, who'd cried when Ethan took his first steps, who'd slow danced with me at my mother's birthday party just last year. And the lingerie. I found it by accident, or maybe by instinct, on day 5. She was at work and the kids were at school, and I was looking for a jacket in our shared closet when I noticed a shopping bag tucked behind her winter coats. The ones she hadn't touched in months because Atlanta doesn't really have winter. The receipt was still inside. Victoria's Secret. $400. Dated 3 months ago. I photographed everything. The bag, the contents, the receipt. My hands steady as they'd been when I'd photographed IED components for Army intelligence. Items I had never seen her wear. Items she had clearly never intended to wear for me. Each discovery was a small death. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a quiet erosion of everything I'd believed about my life. The marriage I thought I had was dissolving like sugar in water, revealing something else underneath. Something I didn't recognize. But I didn't react. I cataloged. I planned. 8 years in the Rangers had taught me patience. Had taught me that emotion was a luxury you indulged after the mission was complete, not before. On day 7, I called in a personal day and parked across the street from the grind at 9:30 a.m. Rented a nondescript gray sedan for the occasion, nothing that would catch the eye. Brought a newspaper I had no intention of reading and a thermos of coffee I barely touched. Linda's white Lexus pulled in at 10:15. My heart should have been pounding. My hands should have been shaking. But they weren't. The calm that settled over me was familiar. The same cold focus I'd felt on patrol in hostile territory when survival depended on observation and reaction, not emotion. She parked near the entrance, checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, applied fresh lipstick. For a coffee meeting. I photographed all of it. 2 minutes later, a black BMW 7 Series pulled in beside her. The man who stepped out was tall, well-built, early 40s. Silver at his temples, the kind of distinguished aging that men's magazines celebrate. His suit probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Italian, if I had to guess, tailored to perfection. His watch caught the sunlight as he closed his car door. Rolex, Submariner, 15 grand minimum. He moved toward the entrance just as Linda stepped out of her car. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. That wordless communication of intimacy, the language of people who know each other's bodies. He smiled. She smiled back. They didn't kiss. Nothing so obvious. But he placed his hand on the small of her back as he held the door for her, his fingers spreading possessively across her spine, and she leaned into the touch with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. This wasn't new. This wasn't awkward. This was practiced. I photographed everything. License plate, faces, the casual intimacy of their body language, close-ups and wide shots, times stamped automatically by my camera app, evidence, ammunition, insurance. My hands were steady. 8 years in the Army teaches you to compartmentalize. The emotional reckoning could wait. Right now, I had a mission. My buddy Marcus still had connections at the DMV from his time with the Atlanta PD. The BMW came back registered to Grant Whitfield, residential address in Buckhead. That night, while Linda slept beside me, I researched him on my laptop in the living room. Grant Whitfield. Age 43, senior partner at Whitfield & Associates, a high-end real estate development firm. Net worth estimated at $12 million. Married to Diane Whitfield, née Harrington, for 16 years. 3 children, 14, 12, and 8. His company had developed the mixed-use building where Linda's pharmaceutical company was headquartered. A $2.3 million renovation completed 14 months ago. That's when they met. While I was coaching Ethan's baseball team and making Saturday morning pancakes and planning date nights that Linda always seemed too busy to attend. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed. The heat kicked on. Somewhere upstairs, one of the kids coughed in their sleep. 14 months. My wife had been sleeping with another man for over a year, and I'd been too trusting, too stupid, to see it. Never again. Derek Palmer had been my sergeant in Afghanistan. 2 tours together, more close calls than I could count. Saved my life outside Kabul when an IED turned our convoy into a fireball. Pulled me from the wreckage with his bare hands. Second-degree burns on his arms that he still had scars from. Now he ran a private investigation firm out of Nashville, and when I called him, he picked up on the second ring. Preston Cole. Been a while, brother. I need your help, Derek. A pause. He heard something in my voice. After years of combat together, he could read me even through a phone line. What kind of help? The kind that stays quiet. The kind that ends a marriage. Long silence. Then, tell me everything. I told him. The coffee shop, the barista, the BMW and its silver-templed driver, the late nights and the gym membership and the lingerie I'd never seen. He listened without interrupting, the way he'd listened to intelligence briefings in another life. You're sure about this? He asked when I finished. I mean, before I get my people involved, I need to know you're not going to change your mind halfway through. I watched her apply lipstick in her car before meeting him. I watched him put his hand on her back like he owned her. I found $400 worth of underwear she never wore for me. My voice was steady, flat. I'm sure. Don't tip your hand. Get everything you need first. Emotions later. You confront her now, she'll cover her tracks. Delete texts, close accounts, coordinate a story with her boyfriend. You'll end up in a he-said-she-said divorce with nothing but suspicions and a broken heart. How much? $3,000 retainer. More depending on what we find and how deep this goes. I'll wire it tonight. Preston? His voice softened slightly. I'm sorry, man. I know how much this hurts. Not yet, I said. It doesn't hurt yet. I'm not letting it. That's the training talking. Compartmentalization. It'll catch up to you eventually. Let it catch up after. Right now, I need to be operational. I need evidence. I need leverage. I need to protect my kids. Copy that. I'll be in Atlanta by Friday. 3 days later, Derek was in a hotel room across town with 2 associates, both former Army intelligence, both discreet, and enough surveillance equipment to monitor a small country. Over the next 2 weeks, he documented everything. 6 separate coffee shop meetings, photographed through a telephoto lens from a rented van. My wife and her lover, laughing over lattes, touching hands across the table, living a life I knew nothing about. Linda checking into a boutique hotel downtown during what she'd told me was a work conference in Chicago. Derek pulled the hotel's guest registry through a contact at the front desk. The conference had been real. Linda's attendance had not. She'd never left Georgia. Phone records showing 147 text messages to an unknown number in the past month alone. We couldn't get the content without a warrant, but the volume spoke for itself. 147 messages to someone she'd never mentioned. Someone who wasn't me. Credit card statements I'd never seen from an account she'd opened without telling me. Purchases I'd never known about. Restaurants I'd never eaten at. A financial double life running parallel to our marriage. There's something else, Derek said when we met at his hotel room on day 18. He was sitting at the desk, folders spread out in front of him, the TV muted on some news channel. This is where it gets interesting. He slid a folder across the table. The hotel where she's been meeting him? The boutique place downtown? Whitfield owns it. Part of his real estate portfolio. They get rooms comped. No credit card charge, no paper trail, nothing that would show up on any statement you'd see. I opened the folder. Dates, times, room numbers. 9 months of records, obtained through what Derek delicately called alternative channels. She's been paying for a membership at a private club attached to the hotel, Derek continued, leaning back in his chair. $350 a month. The club's mostly just a front. Spa services, fitness center, the kind of amenities that justify the fee. But what it really gives her is a legitimate reason to be in the building anytime she wants. A cover story. Oh, I was just at the gym, honey. Except the gym is attached to a hotel where her lover gets free rooms. $350 a month. For nearly a year. That was over $4,000 spent on convenient access to adultery. While I'd been managing our household budget, worrying about college funds and retirement contributions, making sure we had enough for the kids' activities and the occasional family vacation, my wife had been investing in her secret life. There's one more thing. Derek's expression shifted, became something harder. Whitfield's been texting with his wife, or was, before she started getting suspicious and he got more careful. I got access through a mutual acquaintance who does IT work for the hotel. Did some digging in the system backups. He handed me a printout. These are some of the things your wife's been telling him about you. I read them. He's never emotionally available. I feel like I'm married to a ghost. Preston wouldn't notice if I disappeared. Work is all he cares about. The marriage has been dead for years. I'm just there for the kids. He neglects me. I can't remember the last time he actually saw me. I don't think he's ever really loved me. Not the way you do. I set the paper down on the desk. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. Inside, something that had been holding itself together very carefully began to crack. Preston? Derek's voice was cautious. You okay? She rewrote our entire marriage, I said slowly, to justify what she was doing, to make herself the victim. They always do, he said. It's easier to betray someone if you convince yourself they deserve it. I coached Ethan's team. Every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. I was on that field. I made breakfast for the family every weekend. I planned date nights. I stopped, took a breath. Date nights, she was always too busy to attend. Now I know why. Derek nodded, waited. She told him I neglect her. She told him our marriage was dead. She told him I don't love her. I looked up at my old sergeant, my old friend. And all this time, I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something. I was living in a marriage that apparently only existed in my head. What do you want to do? I want her to understand consequences, I said. And I want my children protected from the fallout. Can you help me with that? Brother, that's exactly what we're going to do. The next call I made was to Victoria Sloan, whose reputation in Atlanta family law circles preceded her. She'd been described to me as a shark, which was exactly what I needed. Her office was downtown, all glass and chrome and aggressive efficiency. She was 52, silver-haired, and looked at me with the kind of appraising intelligence that made me understand why opposing counsel feared her. You've done your homework, she said, reviewing the folder I'd brought. Most men who come to me are emotional wrecks looking for validation. You've brought me a case. I want to know my options. Georgia is an equitable distribution state. Assets acquired during the marriage get divided fairly, which doesn't always mean equally. She turned a page. Your wife earns $145. You earn $175. Combined assets of approximately $1.8 million. House, retirement accounts, savings. On paper, standard divorce, she'd walk away with roughly half. And off paper, Victoria smiled. It wasn't warm. Adultery in Georgia can bar a cheating spouse from alimony, if proven. Which, she tapped the folder, you can prove. Additionally, these hidden credit card debts, $23,000 she concealed from you, that's marital waste. She accumulated it secretly. She keeps it personally. What about the house? You said she's not on the mortgage? She said adding her name was too complicated. We never got around to it. Then she has no direct claim to the property. She may be entitled to a portion of the equity as a marital asset, but that's negotiable. Victoria leaned back. Mr. Cole, you're in a strong position, stronger than most. The question is, what do you want? I thought about Ethan and Sophie, about 11 years of memories, some real and some apparently fictional. about the woman sleeping next to me every night while texting another man. I want her to understand consequences, I said, and I want to protect my children. Then we're aligned. She pulled out a legal pad. Now, tell me about Grant Whitfield's wife. Diane Whitfield responded to my email within 2 hours. I'd spent considerable time crafting that message. No accusations, no threats, nothing that could be construed as blackmail or harassment. Just a simple statement. I believe we share a common problem. I have documentation. I think we should meet. Her response was equally measured. I've suspected for months. Where and when? We met in Victoria's conference room 3 days later. Diane was 41, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and careful breeding. She had the kind of composure that comes from a lifetime of managing appearances. But when I spread the photographs across the table, something cracked behind her eyes. How long? She asked quietly. At least 9 months that I can document. Probably longer. She studied each image with methodical precision. Her husband and my wife at the coffee shop, entering the hotel. The security footage Derek had obtained showing them disappearing into room 412. This isn't his first, she finally said. 6 years ago, there was a woman at his firm. Young associate, fresh out of graduate school. I found out, confronted him, and he swore it would never happen again. Her jaw tightened. I believed him. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made the choice to stay. To believe the apology, protect the family, maintain the appearance. She gathered the photos into a neat stack. I won't make that mistake twice. We talked for 3 hours. Diane, it turned out, wasn't just a wronged wife. She was a formidable ally. Her family money had funded Grant's initial real estate ventures. Her connections in Atlanta society had opened doors for his business. And her family's lawyers had insisted on a prenuptial agreement that included an infidelity clause. He's been hiding money, she said. Shell companies, offshore accounts. I never had proof, but I've suspected for years that he's been preparing for this, expecting me to eventually catch him and positioning himself to minimize the damage. How much? Millions, potentially. My forensic accountant is already working on it. She also revealed something I hadn't known. Grant had been giving Linda gifts. Expensive ones. A $15,000 watch. An $8,000 handbag. Jewelry that hadn't appeared on any credit card statement I'd seen. I found the receipts in his desk, Diane said. He wasn't even careful about hiding them. Arrogant enough to assume I'd never look. Victoria, who had been taking notes throughout, set down her pen. These gifts are significant. On Grant's side, they represent marital waste, using family assets to support an extramarital affair. On Linda's side, they're undisclosed assets that should have been reported. Diane and I looked at each other across the conference table. Two strangers bound by mutual betrayal, planning a coordinated demolition of 2 marriages. How do you want to handle this? She asked. Together, I said. We file at the same time. They don't get a chance to coordinate their stories or hide assets. Maximum impact, minimum warning. She nodded slowly. I can work with that. The next 2 weeks were spent finalizing the trap. I moved 50% of our liquid savings into a new account. Legal in Georgia as long as it's documented, Victoria assured me. I photographed every marital asset. Derek continued surveillance, adding to the dossier that now ran 47 pages. Linda remained oblivious. Or perhaps she simply couldn't imagine that her methodical, predictable husband was capable of this kind of strategic planning. She'd constructed a narrative in which I was the neglectful spouse, the emotionally distant workaholic who'd driven her into another man's arms. It never occurred to her that I was watching, documenting, preparing. On day 42, I told her I had a 3-day work trip to Denver. Oh. She tried to look disappointed, but I caught the flash of something else. Relief, maybe, or anticipation. When do you leave? Thursday morning. I'll be back Sunday night. The kids will miss you. I'll call them every night. That evening, she was unusually affectionate, touching my arm when she passed, sitting close to me on the couch. When we went to bed, she initiated intimacy for the first time in weeks, pressing against me in the darkness. I pleaded exhaustion. She accepted it too easily, rolled over, satisfied that she'd made the effort. Within minutes, her breathing had slowed into sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours. Thursday morning, I kissed the kids goodbye and drove away from my house. Linda watched from the doorway, waving, playing the role of devoted wife until my car disappeared around the corner. I checked into a hotel 10 miles from home. Derek was already in position near the boutique hotel downtown. Diane had confirmed that Grant had cleared his schedule for Thursday evening. At 7:15 p.m., Linda dropped Ethan and Sophie at my mother's house. She'd told them Mommy had a work event and Daddy was traveling. Lies stacked on lies. A foundation of deception that had become second nature to her. At 8:30 p.m., her white Lexus pulled into the hotel parking structure. At 8:47 p.m., Grant Whitfield's BMW followed. At 9:02 p.m., they entered room 412 together. Derek sent me the photographs in real time. My wife, walking hand in hand with her lover, laughing at something he said, leaning into him as they waited for the elevator. I studied each image with clinical detachment. This woman I'd built a life with. This mother of my children. This stranger I'd been sleeping next to for 11 years. At 10:15 p.m., Diane Whitfield walked into the hotel lobby. She'd insisted on this part, the confrontation, the moment of exposure. I need to see his face, she'd said. I need him to know that I know. I wasn't there. That was by design. My hands stayed clean. But Derek captured everything. Diane used her master key. She owned 40% of this hotel through her family trust. She had access to every room. She walked in on them without warning, without announcement, without giving them time to construct alibis or explanations. The audio Derek recorded was muffled but audible. Grant's voice, panicked and pleading. Linda's silence. Complete, frozen shock. And Diane, cold as ice. My attorney will be in contact. Don't come home. At 10:45 p.m., I called Linda from my hotel room. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice strange and hollow. Hello? Hey, just checking in. Everything okay there? A pause. I could hear her trying to compose herself, trying to remember how to lie. Fine, just tired. Long day. Kids get to mom's okay? Yeah, they're fine. Good. I'll call them tomorrow. Love you. Another pause, longer this time. Then, love you too. I hung up and sat in the darkness for a long time, turning my wedding ring around my finger. 11 years, 2 children. A life I'd thought was real. Tomorrow, it would all be over. I returned from Denver at 6 the next morning. The house was quiet when I pulled into the driveway. Too quiet. No lights in the windows, no sounds of children getting ready for school. Just the gray dawn light and the knowledge of what was waiting inside. Linda was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She hadn't slept. That much was obvious from the moment I saw her. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed with red, her makeup smeared in tracks down her cheeks. Her hair hung lank and unwashed around her face. She was wearing the same clothes she'd had on yesterday, wrinkled now, slept in. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. Or maybe like she was the ghost, already dead and just waiting for someone to notice. We need to talk, she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I set down my bag and sat across from her. The same table where we'd eaten 1,000 family dinners. Where the kids did homework while I helped with math problems. Where we'd planned birthday parties and summer vacations and a future that was never going to happen. I'm listening, She started slowly, carefully, still trying to control the narrative even now, still trying to find the angle, the spin, the story that might save her. Something happened last night with someone. She swallowed hard. I made a mistake, Preston. A terrible mistake. I don't even know how to begin to explain. I said nothing, just watched her. The way her hands twisted in her lap. The way her eyes kept darting to mine and then away, like she couldn't bear to hold my gaze. It was emotional mostly. She was crying now, tears sliding down her face. I was lonely. You were always working, always traveling, and I felt invisible in my own home, in my own marriage. And he was there. Grant. He listened to me. He made me feel special when I felt like furniture, when I felt like you wouldn't notice if I disappeared. I still said nothing. I know that's not an excuse. I know what I did was wrong, but I need you to understand. I wasn't looking for this. I didn't go out trying to find someone else. It just happened. And then it got out of control, and I didn't know how to stop it, and Linda. She stopped mid-sentence, freezing at something in my voice. I slid a manila envelope across the table. It was thick, heavy with documentation. Months of work. Thousands of dollars in investigation fees. The truth, printed and photographed and undeniable. She stared at it like it might bite her. What is this? Open it. Her hands were shaking as she lifted the flap. Photographs spilled out first. Her and Grant at the coffee shop, at the hotel, entering room 412 together with his hand on her hip. Then, hotel records with dates and times. Text message logs showing the volume of their communication. Credit card statements she'd thought were hidden. The secret account, the hidden purchases, the $23,000 in debt she'd accumulated without telling me. The gym membership that wasn't a gym membership. The lingerie receipts. She went through each document, her face shifting from confusion to recognition to horror to something that looked almost like relief. The relief of someone who's been carrying a secret for too long and finally gets caught. How did you… Emotional, I said quietly. You checked into his hotel 11 times in 9 months. 11 times, Linda. That's not emotional. That's premeditated. That's scheduled. That's put it on the calendar deliberate. Preston, please. A mistake? You bought underwear I've never seen. $400 at Victoria's Secret, and not one piece of it ever appeared in our bedroom. You told him I neglect you. You said our marriage has been dead for years. You told him I don't love you. I don't love you. While I was at home making Saturday breakfast and coaching our son's team and thinking we were building a life together. I kept my voice flat, controlled, though something was burning in my chest like acid. You rewrote our entire history to justify what you were doing. You made me the villain in a story you were writing to excuse your own choices. Her composure shattered completely. The carefully constructed mask of the wronged wife, the lonely spouse driven to infidelity by a neglectful husband, fell away and revealed something uglier underneath. Something defensive. Something desperate. You were never here, she exploded, her voice rising to a near shriek. Work trips and late nights and always something more important than me. Do you know what it's like to feel invisible in your own marriage? To wonder if your husband would even notice if you just disappeared one day. I noticed when you were gone, I said. I noticed every work conference that turned out to be a hotel room 10 miles from here. I noticed every late night that was actually an early evening with another man. I noticed, Linda. You just didn't think I would. I didn't mean… I coached Ethan's baseball team, I said. Every practice, every game. I made breakfast every Saturday morning. Pancakes for Sophie, eggs for you, bacon for Ethan. I planned date nights. You remember those? The restaurant reservations you always had to cancel because something came up at work? I made 11 of those reservations in the past year. You showed up for 3. She had no response to that. The truth, laid bare, was impervious to spin. "I filed for divorce," I continued. "You'll be served today. My attorney is Victoria Sloan. I'm taking the kids to my mother's house this morning. You have 48 hours to find somewhere else to stay." "You can't do this. This is my house, too. I have rights." "No," I stood up. "It's my house. My name on the mortgage, my signature on the deed. You said adding your name was too complicated, remember? Too much paperwork, too many fees. You'd get around to it eventually." The realization hit her visibly. The blood draining from her face, her mouth opening and closing without sound. All those years of financial carelessness, letting me handle the mortgage, the investments, the paperwork she found tedious. She'd trusted me to manage our joint life while she was busy dismantling it. What about the kids? I'm not going to keep them from their mother, but I am going to protect them from the instability you've created, from the lies you've told, from whatever version of this story you're going to try to sell them. I picked up my bag. 48 hours, Linda. When I come back with the kids on Sunday, I expect you to be gone. Preston, her voice broke. Please, can't we at least talk about this? Go to counseling? Try to work through what? 11 times in a hotel room with another man? The texts where you told him our marriage was dead? The secret credit cards and the hidden debt and the lies you told me every single day for over a year? I shook my head. There's nothing to work through. You made your choices. Now you live with them. I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, out of the marriage I'd thought was real. Behind me, I could hear her crying. Loud, ugly sobs that followed me down the driveway. I didn't look back. The next 90 days were a methodical dismantling of 2 marriages. Linda's case collapsed almost immediately. Victoria Sloan was everything her reputation promised: relentless, precise, utterly without sentiment. She presented the evidence of adultery in a preliminary hearing that lasted less than an hour. The photographs, the hotel records, the text message logs. Georgia law was unambiguous. Proven infidelity barred alimony claims. Linda's attorney, a younger man who'd clearly never faced Victoria before, tried to argue extenuating circumstances. Emotional neglect. A marriage that had deteriorated over time. A woman driven to desperation by loneliness. "Your Honor," Victoria said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty. "My client has documentation showing that he was present for every one of his son's baseball games. That he prepared family breakfast every Saturday. That he made no fewer than 11 dinner reservations for date nights with his wife over the past year. The respondent canceled 9 of them." She paused for effect. The reason she canceled them is now quite clear. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd probably seen 1,000 cases just like this, looked at Linda with something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "The evidence of infidelity is clear," she said. "Alimony is denied. The hidden debt was declared non-marital. She'd concealed it, she'd keep it. Every penny of the $23,000 was hers to pay off from her own resources. The marital assets were divided, but the house stayed with me. I'd paid the mortgage, I'd maintained the property, and she'd voluntarily declined to add her name to the deed. Net result, Linda walked away with approximately $180,000 from our combined savings and retirement accounts, her car, and a pile of debt she'd never expected to face alone. Grant's fall was more spectacular. Diane Whitfield's forensic accountants were thorough. They found $2.4 million in hidden shell companies, money he'd been siphoning for years, setting up offshore accounts in preparation for a divorce he'd apparently considered inevitable. He'd been planning his exit strategy even while swearing fidelity to his wife, even while funding his mistress's private club membership, even while promising my wife that she was the love of his life. Her family's lawyers invoked the prenuptial clause without mercy. It had been written by Harrington attorneys 16 years ago, back when Grant was an ambitious young developer who needed her family's money and connections to launch his career. Infidelity meant forfeiture of any claim to Harrington family assets, of any share of the properties she'd helped fund, of the social standing he'd spent 2 decades cultivating. His business partners, informed of the scandal through carefully orchestrated leaks, Diane was nothing if not strategic, began distancing themselves immediately. 2 major development deals collapsed when investors got cold feet. "No one wants to back a man who can't keep his house in order," one partner was quoted as saying in a Business Journal article. "If he'll lie to his wife, he'll lie to his partners." In Atlanta real estate circles, word spread quickly. Grant Whitfield had cheated on a Harrington. His social capital, carefully accumulated over 16 years of charity galas and country club memberships and strategic friendships, evaporated overnight. Invitations stopped arriving. Phone calls went unreturned. The world he'd worked so hard to build turned its back on him without hesitation. He tried to contact me once. A phone call that I let go to voicemail. "Preston, hey, it's Grant. Grant Whitfield. Listen, I know things are complicated right now, but I think we should talk. Man to man. Try to understand each other's perspective. I mean, we were both in difficult situations, and sometimes these things just happen," and a pause, a sigh. "Look, I just think if we sat down together, had a drink, talked things through, we could figure out how to handle this without destroying everyone's lives. Call me back." I forwarded the message to Victoria, who sent a cease and desist letter by courier that afternoon. There was nothing Grant Whitfield could say that I had any interest in hearing. No justification. No man-to-man understanding. He'd slept with my wife for a year while I made pancakes for my children. Whatever perspective he wanted to share could remain unshared. The most pathetic moment came when Derek discovered, through his continued monitoring, that Grant had offered Linda $50,000 to go away quietly. To disappear from Atlanta, to not be a visible reminder of his scandal, to not be a liability to his already crumbling reputation. She'd apparently considered it. There were emails negotiating terms, discussing logistics. Where would she go? What would she tell the kids? How would they explain her sudden relocation? The desperation of that negotiation, 2 people who destroyed their families now trying to minimize their mutual embarrassment, haggling over the price of silence, was entered into both divorce proceedings as evidence of conspiracy. It didn't change the financial outcome significantly, but it did establish a record, a documentation of just how far they were willing to go to protect themselves, even from each other. The hardest part was the children. Ethan was 9, old enough to understand that something terrible had happened, young enough to not know how to process it. He'd been angry since the night I sat them down and explained, in the most age-appropriate terms I could manage, that Mommy and Daddy weren't going to be married anymore. That people sometimes grow apart. That it wasn't anyone's fault. Except that wasn't entirely true, was it? It was someone's fault. But that wasn't a burden I was going to put on my children. His anger manifested in slammed doors and monosyllabic responses. In a sudden disinterest in activities he'd previously loved, video games gathered dust, baseball equipment sat unused in the garage, invitations to friends' houses went ignored. He moved through the house like a storm cloud, radiating resentment he couldn't articulate and didn't understand. Sophie was 7, confused but resilient in the way that younger children often are. She hadn't yet learned to carry pain around with her, to let it fester and grow. She lived in the moment, which meant she was sad when she was sad and happy when she was happy, with no space in between for brooding. But she had questions. So many questions. "When will Daddy and Mommy stop being sad?" she asked one night, curled up next to me on the couch while Ethan sulked in his room. "We're working on that, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups take a while to figure things out. Why can't we all live together anymore, like before?" "Because Sometimes things change. Sometimes people need to live in different places to be happy. Did I do something wrong? That one stopped me cold. I pulled her closer, tucking her head under my chin. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing. This is about mommy and daddy, not about you and Ethan. We both love you more than anything in the world. That will never, ever change. She seemed to accept this, at least for the moment. Children are adaptable. They bend where adults break. Ethan was harder. 3 weeks after Linda moved out, he came to me while I was working in my home office. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, not speaking, his face a mask of conflicted emotion. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Was Mom's friend the reason you got divorced? I set down my pen. What makes you ask that? He looked at his feet. I saw something on her phone once, a few months ago, a text from someone. I didn't understand it then. My son had been carrying this knowledge, this half-formed awareness, for months. While I'd been conducting surveillance and building legal cases, he'd been processing his own discoveries in silence. Come here. He sat in the chair across from my desk, looking smaller than his 9 years. Yes, I said finally. That's part of the reason. But Ethan, and I need you to understand this, what happened between your mother and me is between adults. It's not your burden to carry. Your job is just to be a kid. But she hurt you. She did. And that's something I have to work through. But she's still your mother. She still loves you. And I'm not going to ask you to choose sides or carry grudges for me. Okay? He nodded, though I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. The anger was still there, simmering. But he was 9. He shouldn't have to process his mother's betrayal. I enrolled him in therapy that week. Cost $200 a session, twice a week, worth every penny. Linda's new life was a study in diminished circumstances. Her $180,000 seemed substantial until you subtracted attorney fees, the hidden debt she'd accumulated, first and last month's rent on an apartment, furniture for a life she'd never planned to live. Within 6 months, her net liquid assets had dropped to roughly $95,000. Her job remained, technically, but she'd been quietly moved off high-profile accounts. Colleagues who'd heard whispers kept their distance. Human Resources had received an anonymous tip about her relationship with a vendor. Diane's connections reached further than even I'd realized. She wasn't fired, but she was frozen out. Her career trajectory flatlined. She tried to reconcile once. It was a Sunday afternoon in March, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was in the backyard, watching Sophie chase the neighbor's dog, when Linda appeared at the fence. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of consequences. Can we talk? I walked over, keeping the fence between us. What about? Us. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice hoarse. I made a terrible mistake, Preston. The worst mistake of my life. Not a day goes by that I don't regret what I did. That's something you'll have to live with. I know I am. But I keep thinking, we had 11 years. 2 beautiful children. A life. She was crying now, the tears flowing freely. Doesn't that count for anything? Couldn't we try again? Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Linda. I said her name softly, without anger. The rage had burned itself out months ago, leaving only a kind of tired clarity. You didn't make a mistake. You made 11 months of choices. Every lie you told me, every hotel room, every text where you described our marriage as loveless, every time you came home and kissed our children goodnight before crawling into bed with me like nothing was wrong. I shook my head. Those weren't mistakes. Those were decisions. You chose him. You don't get to choose me now that he's gone. I turned and walked back to where Sophie was playing. When I looked over my shoulder, Linda was gone. 2 weeks later, Derek sent me a message. Grant Whitfield had a new girlfriend. a 29-year-old associate at his struggling firm. Apparently, the man who'd professed to love my wife had discarded her the moment she became inconvenient. I didn't tell Linda, but I knew, through the kids' occasional comments about her mood, that she'd found out. A year after that morning at the grind, I walked back in. The same exposed brick, the same reclaimed wood. Haley was still behind the counter, her purple streaks now faded to a softer violet. She recognized me immediately, and her face went through a complicated series of expressions: embarrassment, apprehension, something like guilt. "Just a black coffee," I said. "Large." She made it without comment, wouldn't meet my eyes. I left a 20 on the counter and told her to keep the change. I sat at the corner table. Not to wait. There was no one left to wait for. Just to sit. To prove to myself that this place no longer held any power over me. My phone buzzed. A text from Allison. "Still on for dinner? Kids are at your mom's." Allison Bennett. 35, veterinarian. Introduced by a mutual friend 3 months ago. We'd taken things slow. I wasn't ready for anything serious, and she understood that. But she was kind and patient, and didn't treat my divorce as baggage to be tolerated. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. I finished my coffee, watching the autumn light slant through the windows. October again. 1 full year since my world had cracked open. But here's the thing about cracks. They let the light in. They reveal what was always underneath, hidden by surfaces you thought were solid. The marriage I'd believed in had been a construction, a set dressed by a skilled performer. The woman I'd loved had been a character she'd played, convincingly, until she'd found a better role. I'd mourned that fiction. Now I was building something real. Diane and I met for coffee occasionally. Not at the grind, never there, but at a quiet place near her family's hotel. We weren't friends exactly. We were something harder to define. 2 people who'd walked through the same fire and come out the other side. "Grant's trying to rebuild," she told me at our last meeting. "New firm, new investors, new reputation. It won't work. The Harrington name still means something in this city, and people have long memories." "What about you?" She stirred her coffee, considering. "I'm writing a book about financial protection in marriage. What to look for, how to safeguard yourself, the signs that someone is hiding assets." A thin smile. "Turns out I learned quite a bit. Sounds like a bestseller." "We'll see." She looked at me across the table. "How are the kids?" "Adjusting. Ethan's in therapy, Sophie's remarkably resilient. They spend every other weekend with Linda." I paused. It's not what I wanted for them, but they're okay. That's all we can ask for. The last time I saw Linda, really saw her, not just the brief exchanges during custody handoffs, was at Sophie's school play. She was seated across the auditorium, alone, watching our daughter murder her one line as the narrator's understudy. She looked old. Not in years, but in the way that disappointment ages a person. The vibrancy that had once drawn me to her, that energy I'd found so attractive, had dimmed to something flat and exhausted. I didn't feel satisfaction. I'd thought I would, once. In the early days when the anger was fresh, I'd imagined this moment. Seeing her brought low by her own choices, and expected to feel vindicated. But revenge, it turns out, is a poor substitute for happiness. After the play, Sophie ran to me first, then to Linda. She divided her affection carefully, equally, the way children learn to do when their world splits in half. "She was amazing," Linda said to me, her voice neutral. She was. A moment of silence. Everything unsaid, everything that could never be unsaid. "Preston," she started. "Don't." I kept my voice low, private, away from Sophie's ears. "There's nothing to say. We co-parent our children. We keep things civil. That's all we are now." She nodded, and something in her face settled into resignation. The final acceptance of loss. I took Sophie's hand and walked out into the evening air. The sky was clear, stars just beginning to emerge over the Atlanta skyline. "Dad?" Sophie tugged my arm. "Can we get ice cream?" "It's a school night. Please? Just this once?" I looked down at her face, Linda's eyes, my stubborn chin, a person entirely her own. "Just this once," I agreed. She cheered and skipped toward the car, already debating flavors. Chocolate or strawberry? The eternal dilemma. I followed her, leaving the auditorium and everything it represented behind. There's no tidy moral to this story, no profound realization about love and trust and the fragility of human connection. My wife cheated on me with a wealthy man who told her pretty lies. I found out. I gathered evidence. I protected myself and my children. I moved on. Life doesn't offer resolution, only continuation. Ethan is in middle school now, still seeing his therapist once a month, doing better than I'd feared. Sophie remains Sophie. Joyful, scattered, exhausting. Allison and I are still taking things slow, but she's started leaving a toothbrush at my place. Linda pays her child support on time, sees the kids every other weekend, and maintains the polite fiction that we're successfully co-parenting. Maybe we are. Our children are loved, provided for, safe. That counts for something. Grant Whitfield, last I heard, had moved to Charlotte. Fresh start, new market, old patterns. Diane predicted he'd find another young associate within a year. I didn't care enough to check. The coffee shop, The Grind, closed 6 months after my visit. New owners, apparently, with different ideas about exposed brick and reclaimed wood. A smoothie place now, according to the sign. I've never been inside. Some places are better left behind. Last Saturday I was making breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, the whole routine. Allison was reading the paper at the kitchen table while the kids argued about something inconsequential in the living room. "You seem happy," she said, looking up. I flipped a pancake, considered the observation. I am. Even after everything? Maybe because of everything. I slid the pancake onto a plate, started another. I spent 11 years building a life with someone who was never really there. Now I'm building something with people who are? She smiled. That quiet, uncomplicated smile that first drew me to her. That's very philosophical for 8 a.m. I'm a deep thinker. You're a man who makes excellent pancakes. Don't oversell yourself. I threw a blueberry at her. She caught it and ate it. In the living room, Sophie shrieked at something Ethan said. Normal sounds, normal morning. The broken pieces of my old life had been swept away, discarded. What remained was something simpler, smaller, but entirely mine. I finished the pancakes and called the kids to breakfast.